Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have these two really pretty mini slimline cards featuring the SpellBinders Magnolia Blooms dies. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to create my card bases first, and I like my mini slimlines to be 6x6 and then scored at the 3-inch mark. I don't think that there's an actual set size to mini slimline cards. This is just kind of my preference. I think that there are dies that do slightly bigger than this, but I find this is the easiest way for me to do my mini slimline cards. So this is just what I tend to do. So yeah, I'm going to cut them down to 6x6 inches, and then I'll bring in my scoring tool and I will score them at the 3-inch mark. And I like to score on both sides because I use a very heavyweight cardstock for my bases. So I find it easier to get them to fold properly if I score on both sides. And again, that's just a preference thing. I don't think it really matters. I just don't like it when I have a card and it can't hold itself up. I find that really irritating. So I tend to use fairly heavyweight cardstock. And then we're going to cut the dies. So I'm going to make two. I kind of wanted to make a more in-depth one and then kind of a simpler version of this similar card. So I have the Audrey blue cardstock there, and I also have some holographic lava cardstock. Both are from Says Stamp, and everything's listed and linked down below if you're ever interested in what I'm using specifically. But I did also use some cotton candy cardstock for the pink version of this card. And on that one, I'm kind of going, I would say it's monochromatic, which it was going to be originally, but in the end, I decided I couldn't leave it that way. I'm a more is more style of crafter. I kind of have a tendency to just keep adding things because I never know when to stop. So because of that, the pink one ended up being quite a bit more going on with it. And then the Audrey blue one actually ends up being a more simple card. So I am going to do the cotton candy for both the layering die and the outline die. But I mean, you could do this in any color combo. I chose pink because I really like pink, but this would look stunning in any color. This die set is just really, really pretty. So I brought in my Barely Art glue, and I'm just going to put little dabs all across the back. This isn't a huge deal because this glue does dry clear and matte. It doesn't really matter if it oozes out, especially on something like this cardstock. I mean, on vellum, I'm a lot more careful with it, but on this cardstock, you're not really going to tell. So if you have a little bit of seeping, it doesn't really matter. Nobody would see it. And then I just press them into each other, and I kind of like to use liquid glue because that gives me a chance to move it around a little bit before I actually get it to adhere. And now for the pink one, we're going to do it first, and we're going to go a bit in depth with this. I mean, you could stop at any point. This is just me being a bit more is more. So I brought in an RV42 Copic marker, and this is just to add some depth to the flowers. If you could cut this out in white cardstock and then do the same thing, same idea, you could bring in colors to color the flowers. I just really wanted the pink, so I'm going to use pink, and then I just brought in, like I said, a Copic marker just to add some definition to the petals. And I did test out a few different pinks, as you can see on that little scrap beside my arm there. But this is the end, what color I decided to use, because I thought it matched pretty well. And of course, keep in mind, it does dry back a bit as well. So for the background of my mini slimline card, I did bring in some more of the same cotton candy cardstock, and then I brought in the deckled edge trimmer just to add a little bit more interest to my card panel. You could, of course, you don't need this trimmer. You could cut it just as a panel. It's not a big deal. And I do have a little struggle here with the trimmer. Every once in a while, it gets a little finicky, and I struggle to get a piece to cut. But it's pretty rare. And again, I'm more stubborn than the trimmer, so I always make it work. But every once in a while, it gets a little stubborn and doesn't really want to cut through my cardstock. But I just like the little deckling it adds. And of course, the decal edge is different of the whole blade. So depending on how much decal or how little decal you'd like, it will change where you choose to use the trimmer. And then I really wanted to add a little more texture to the background. So I brought in the Says Stamp Random Dots and Stars stencil, and I'm just pouncing some Versamark ink through the dots portion of the stencil. It's actually fits perfectly on a mini slimline card, as you can see, because there's my panel and then the stars are on the other side and all of the dots are covering it. So it is perfectly sized for a mini slimline card, which is awesome. And then I just pounced it through the stencil with a flat foam from Ranger. And then I'm going to pour on some Says Stamp Clear Detail Embossing Powder. Now, you wouldn't need to. You could absolutely leave it like this and just let it dry. It's just that at this point, I had decided that we were going to go bold with this card. So I wanted to do some ink blending around it. So to keep that lighter pink, the cotton candy colored cardstock, I'm going to seal it in some clear embossing powder. And then that'll keep that color to that cotton candy color instead of the colors I'm going to blend on top. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I bring in my heat tool and I'm just melting the embossing powder over the dots, moving my heat tool pretty consistently so that it doesn't really warp my cardstock. Although again, we're going to adhere this flat, so that wouldn't be a huge deal. And then it's just going to set it down and then start start the blending. So I did bring in three colors of Distress Oxide ink. I have Picked Raspberry, Seedless Preserves, and Black Soot. And I'm just going to use my mini blending brushes. You could use any blending tools for this. It's just that I happen to own the mini blending tools. And I'm just going to go around kind of the outside of the panel to create this more dramatic edge. I like this look. I think that it's really pretty. Again, you could have stopped at any point in this. At this point, I'm going all out. Like now I'm just really wanted to create this dramatic color difference along the edge of the panel. So that is what I am doing. And I love how these three colors layer up. I think they're stunning together. So that's kind of what I was thinking there. And then I bring in the Black Soot just to add a very dark edge to the panel. And then I just I blend through them. I believe I blend through them twice. I don't show that to you here. I just show you going through them once. But I blend through them twice just to get a more consistent blend between the Picked Raspberry and the Seedless Preserves. And then that's pretty much it for the blending. And I think that dramatic edge just looks so pretty. I love how that turned out. And then I brought in a clean piece of paper towel and I'm just wiping off the dots that are underneath the blending. This is where the embossing powder really comes in because it resists that ink and then you can still have that really cool patterning in the background, but you still get that distress ink look. So I just love how that turned out. Sorry, distress oxide look. And then I flicked on some Perfect Pearls mixed up in a little mini mister bottle. Again, this is just me adding more texture to the background, again, just because I can, more than anything. And then I'm going to adhere down my Magnolia bloom. So I did know that I was going to cut off the kind of unopened bloom up on the side there. So I knew that, so I didn't put any glue behind it, because I knew I would trim it off and then bring it in a different area. But I missed a little bit of the part where it is actually sitting on the panel, so I did have to go back and add some glue there. And then I am going to come in and trim off that piece. This is honestly just because I wanted to adhere it somewhere else on the card. You could leave it. I mean, you could create, I'm generally for my mini slimline cards, I create my own envelopes. So you could absolutely have left it and then just created a bigger envelope. But I chose to adhere it down to the corner and to bring it in again. I'm going to do something similar to the Audrey blue one as well, although I don't adhere it onto the corner. But I do end up having to trim off a portion simply because it doesn't fit on the mini slimline card size. So, and of course that's just, I like mini slimline cards, so I have a tendency to want to create them. But I mean, if you made an A2 or a 5x7 or anything like that, of course this would obviously fit, but for the mini slimline, it doesn't quite. So I do end up having to trim off a couple of the leaves as well, just so that it would fit in the envelope that I will make for it later. And then I just adhered that down. And then we're going to go into the sentiment. So I used a thank you sentiment. This is from the Says Stamp Look for the Rainbows stamp set. I just really like this thank you. I think it's really nice. Sorry, my head gets in the way a little bit there. And I stamped it on some vellum so that I wouldn't lose any of the background. And then I trimmed it out with my trimmer. And I did stamp it in the Picked Raspberry color just because this card has a lot of pink. So I kind of stuck with that coloring. And I am going to end up adhering it down underneath the portion of the bloom there. I don't have that part in just because my head is mostly in the way. It's just, I used a little bit of liquid glue from my Barely Art fine tip and just adhered it behind the letter so you can't really see the glue on the vellum. And I did trim this at an angle on the end. And then I do adhere it, but you're not going to see that here. And of course I adhered it down to my base as well. So now we're moving on to the blue portion of this. And I did trim down a background. I needed something behind the bloom, and I wanted it to be subtle but still have something going on. So I chose to cut down a panel that's just about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base, and I'm going to run it through the Crystal Distortion embossing folder from Simon. Of course, this doesn't quite fit, so I'm going to show you here once I run it through. I do have a small lip right there where it didn't quite fit, but I don't mind. I'm going to hide it behind my flower, so you're not going to see it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it doesn't quite fit in the embossing folder. Yeah, and then I'm going to cut off the little extra bloom and the one leaf. Now you could have cut off both leaves. I almost should have, because in the end it sticks off too far and I do have to trim a portion of it anyways. But I didn't, so I am going to have to do that later, because here you can see it's going to kind of hang off. And then I decide that I'm going to tuck that little flower underneath the edge of the bloom there and just kind of create a fuller bloom that still fits on my mini Slimline card, which I think looks really pretty. I think in the end it turns out stunning. And then I am going to adhere down that little bud first, because I do kind of want it to be behind the bouquet of the flowers. Now, you could have popped the flowers up. I mean, there are so many ways you can make this your own. I'm just trying to give you some ideas of what you can do with these dies if you own them and if you want to kind of create this style of card. I mean, there are so many options. I have other ideas to do with this die set, so I will have other cards coming with this die. But for now, this is kind of what I came up with on the fly for these two today, but I think that they turned out really pretty. And there you can see that I do have quite a bit of the leaf hanging off of the top. It's under my finger, you'll see it here in a second, but I do have quite a bit of that leaf kind of hanging off of the top there, and I am going to have to trim that off. But I'm going to put it on the card anyway because I thought it looked stunning. I love this holographic cardstock. I think that it's so pretty on top of any color. You literally could have used any color. I used Audrey blue because it's pretty, and I pretty much never use colored cardstock, but I mean, this would look super pretty in any of the colors, and that holographic cardstock just adds so much of a punch that it doesn't end up needing much. And then here I brought in my Tim Holtz shears, and I'm just going to trim off all of the excess pieces that are hanging off, which in this case is mostly leaves. I'm going to do this on both of the panels. And I did bring in my Misti to sit on top of the Audrey blue card just because I wasn't sure how well that distortion embossing folder was going to adhere, because it does have a whole bunch of texture. So I covered it in glue, and then I did weigh it down with my Misti, and I just use my Misti because it sits on my desk. You could use anything you like to weigh it down as long as it stays flat. And then here's that leaf, and I am going to adhere it right beside that little bud flower, and it just kind of fills it out, and it looks like it was meant to be there. I think that it turned out really pretty. So you can see there that it kind of just fills out that little area and makes it look like there was two leaves with that little bud, which there were, but not in the way that I've just adhered it. And I think that just kind of finishes it up, and it looks really pretty. And then I brought in 2 colors of gems these are from Pink Fresh Studio. They're the Essential Jewels set. It comes with 9 different little containers of colored gems. So I chose 3 colors. I used 2 green ones or tealy colored ones for this one. And of course, this is where my more is more ends up coming back in, because of course you don't need this many gems on the card. However, because I didn't want to do a sentiment, because I wanted this card to be open to be anything that I wanted it to be. And I just really wanted to add a whole bunch of gems. So I did go a little overboard with the gems, but I think it turned out really pretty. And then on the pink one, I put 5 gems just kind of across the card from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. That's just kind of my preferred way to lay out gems. I just like how it looks, so I tend to lean that way quite a bit, but you can of course do whatever you like. Or not add gems. I think they're pretty either way. So this is just to give you some ideas. So I'm going to hold it up here so you can check them both out in all of their glory. I'd love to know if you preferred one over the other or what you thought of these cards. And I'd love if you'd consider subscribing. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, and I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. And I actually have an extra video planned for this week. So come back this weekend coming up, and I'll have another video for you guys to enjoy. So thank you so much for stopping by, guys, and I cannot wait to see you again. Bye-bye for now.